Hi friends, it's Mr. Stanley here, and I wanted to introduce to you the next and final unit, which is going to be a short one, but it'll be lots of fun. No assessments, no checkpoints, no homework, no workbook pages. Really all it is about thinking and building and designing. So we're going to talk about bridges, and I'm going to give you some bridge challenges to make. I don't really have many rules when it comes to building your bridges. You can use any materials that you like. You can use cans of vegetable soup. You can use rulers, sticks, glue, toilet paper tubes, paper towel tubes. Try to stay away from the tape because you can do a lot without tape. Otherwise, you'll have just a big ball of tape. So we're going to talk about three different kinds of bridges. We're going to talk about beam bridge, an arch bridge, and a suspension bridge. So let's talk about the beam bridge first. So the beam bridge is what it says it is. It has a beam, and the beam basically goes right over top of two columns. And then there's these two things that kind of level out the beam, and that's called those are called abutments. I know it sounds funny and weird, but a beam bridge is a simple bridge. It's probably the simplest bridge to build. It may not have the longest span, but it is kind of a simple bridge to build. So the next one that we're going to take a look at is we're going to take a look at arch bridge. And in an arch bridge, we have something called an arch, and that here is the arch. So it kind of makes an upside down U shape, and then obviously on the sides then that kind of level everything out from the land itself would be abutments. So here are the abutments, and it's a bridge that consists of that, and it's got a keystone at the top that kind of forces all of the weight of whatever is happening down into the ground, and the keystone kind of compresses that. And we're going to talk about compression here in just a minute. So let's talk about suspension bridges. That's the third different type of bridge that we have. And a suspension bridge, it's probably the most complicated bridge, but as you can see, this one kind of looks like it is pretty far apart from the from one part of the land to the other. So suspension bridges, as you can kind of see in this diagram, kind of have a long span or a long distance over their beam. So they do have some towers here, and then in the towers, those kind of help keep the beam up, and then we have these anchorages, or in this case, they are similar to the abutments. And then they have these suspenders right here. And the suspenders, they keep everything kind of pulled up, kind of like suspenders would on pants. And then these cables are connected to the anchorages, which kind of pull at the suspenders, keeping everything together and up. So we have extending these suspenders between these two towers kind of help pull and push everything and keep it in place. So we have those things there, and so that's suspension bridge. Oops. And then after suspension bridge, we have some bridge vocabulary to talk about. We have something called compression, and we have something called tension. Compression is a pressing force when you press something, so you can see the word press in there. And tension is kind of a stretching force or a pulling force. I do have kind of a small little activity for you to think about, and I'm just going to show you myself really quick. When you're thinking about tension, or compression, I'm sorry, this is a good activity to kind of feel what a bridge would feel. And you would take your hands like this, and I want you to press in, and I want you to feel where you feel that compression, or the strongest point of that. And it's almost like I'm making a little arch bridge, and these are my keystones. You can feel that's where a lot of that pressure is coming from. You can kind of feel a little bit in your shoulders and your elbows as well. So that's kind of how a bridge kind of works when it comes to compression. Then I'm going to show you tension. And tension is that pulling. So I like to take my hands like this, and I'm going to pull them together like this, and then I'm just going to pull. And then you can kind of feel where that is. I mean, I can kind of feel my shoulders a little bit, kind of almost feel it in my chest, a little bit of my elbows, but I feel the strongest points right in here where my fingers are. And that's where that tension comes from when you're pulling on that. And that's kind of how a lot of these bridge parts work. So let me show you some other bridge parts that you might want to know. And that would be back in my notes. So if you take a look here, we've got a few different types of things to look at when it comes to bridges. The first thing that you want to take a look at when you're looking at a bridge is a truss. And a truss is, sorry, I'm trying to get my pen to work. A truss is a framework of beams. And you can kind of see those little triangles that are up here. And those little triangles that are up here kind of keep everything in place. Triangles are very strong shapes in nature, and they kind of hold everything together. So there's a good chance you might have seen a beam bridge with some trusses on it. Maybe think about where you might have seen one, or you could Google something. And then this one here is an example of a suspension bridge, and then I had mentioned to you the anchorages, and they kind of work like abutments, but really what they're doing is they are pulling those cables and lifting those suspenders up to hold everything up. And then down here is the other one, and I'm going to be using this one a little bit next week, and that is span. We're going to talk about trying to build one of these bridges with the largest span. And a span is from one end of the abutment or one end of an anchorage to the other. So how long of a distance can your bridge have over whatever is over? Bridges throughout time have gotten people over rivers, streams, lakes, gullies, valleys, and that's kind of what bridges' purpose is for. So we're going to do some bridge challenges. So maybe you want to do one thing before we begin, and that is I'd like for you to maybe think about, if you could, which type of bridge you think is the most efficient, or which bridge you like and why. Do you like the beam bridge? Are you a big fan of the arch bridge? Or do you like the suspension bridge? Very similar to the Golden Gate Bridge, if you haven't seen pictures of that. And speaking of pictures, maybe before you begin, you might want to consider maybe doing some Google searches on the beam bridge, Google search the arch bridge, and Google search the suspension bridge. And that's going to give you some idea on maybe which one you like the best. You could even Google some world record longest spans or the strongest bridges. You could look at some YouTubes. All of those things would help you. So I'm going to put a question here. Which bridge do you like the best, or which do you think is the best type of bridge and why? And that's in your Google Classroom. Thanks for watching today. We'll talk about that next week in our Zoom meetings. Have a good Friday.